Friends, today I am planning to explain about one of the important concept in web application development. We call it as server side rendering. Server side rendering is not a new concept. It is there from long in web application development. Almost every technology, it may be a Java based web application or Python or PHP. Every platform has a server side rendering concept. But today I am planning to explain how to implement the server side rendering using React.js and Material library. So this is about the server side rendering using React 16 and Material UI plus, let me use plus Redux. So that's what we will learn today in this session. But before jumping to full implementation of server side rendering using React.js, let me first explain in brief for the core concept, how exactly the web application works and how the typical client side rendering works, and then we'll move on to server side rendering. Or maybe I will make a separate video for implementation part, and let me focus only on how exactly the web applications rendering work. So let me limit this particular session for only client side rendering and server side rendering basics. Okay. So typical, if you visualize any client server architecture, so this is your sorry, I have to choose yeah, so this is your client machine, which has which is loading the page, typically a browser. Okay, so this is your server where your application is running, maybe cloud based, yeah, it's a cloud. It is deployed in a your favorite cloud like Google GCP or Amazon AWS or Heroku or whichever it is, or Azure. So when I say web application, as you all know, web application has two parts. One is the client part of it. Okay, so I will call it as C, and there is a server part of it. Correct. So usually, typically, what we do, it is you may develop both client and server in a single application, or you may develop both client and server as a different applications altogether. They may be deployed in different servers, or they may be deployed in the same server. Both possibilities are okay. But even now in this example, we'll consider that uh, this is a single application which has a client and server, different two parts. And when in that case, what happens, the client part, usually it is a separate process running in say maybe 3000 port. Okay, and a server part is running usually say maybe in say 3001 port. This is how your app web application typically looks. So when a client machine, when a browser sends a request to your client part, um, it will be a web page loaded on a browser, so it will go to client portion of your web application. So the request will go to, so request will go to the client part of it. And for that is because the browser is loading the page, and browser is expecting an HTML page for the given request, and we typically call it as client-side routing in React.js. Maybe similar terminology may be used in other platform like Python and other PHP also. So for the client route, the request will goes to client part of your application, which is running in 3000 port, which is a separate process running in your server. And for that request, you will get the response as HTML page. So this is a response you are getting, which is an HTML page. HTML. So once that HTML page is written, usually typically what happens in single page applications, the HTML page doesn't include everything required for that particular page. It contains a plain HTML which has just a plain one division in that. So typically, if say for example this your page looks like let me show an example. Yeah, so this is your HTML page which has just one division, nothing other than that. So this doesn't include the whole application, a whole page for that particular request. It is just one plain div. So that HTML page is written to your client from the server. The server means when I say server, it is client part of your server. Then what happens? Usually, typically, when you deploy your application in cloud, you will usually create a build and then you will deploy. When you generate a build using say React commands, React run build, a build folder contains HTML file and other supporting files. And most importantly, your build folder contains bundle.js file. Bundle.js file is the one which includes everything required for your application, your entire app. That is, your all React code will be converted into pure JS, minified, and put it in a bundle.js file. And that bundle.js file is referred in HTML file. So your HTML file includes the build file, which is a bundle.js file. So when HTML is written to browser will again send another request to your client part again, which is for getting bundle.js file. So so what happens? Yeah, so your for that particular request, in response you will get bundle.js file. Okay, bundle.js file. In this bundle.js file, the entire logic of that particular page, calling an API and iterating the response and creating the objects, everything is in that bundle.js file. Then your client again sends a request for your backend to get actual data, and backend will return that is a JSON which JSON which has the actual data required for that particular page. So after getting the API response, your client code will iterate the JSON and it will create objects on the screen. That's how the whole client to server communications are happening. And this is, we typically call it as client-side rendering. So if you analyze this whole communication between client and server, what happens is when a request is sent to server or request is sent to server, so that request will first ask for HTML, and your server will return HTML, and then again your client will request for bundle.js, bundle file, and your server will return a bundle.js file. And then when I say server, it is client part of your application. And then after loading bundle.js, the actual page, your piece of code for that page will run, and you will invoke an API. That's under request. This is API, and then you will get the response for that API. Then actual objects will be rendered. So if you analyze, see that just to load one particular page, you're supposed to request 3 times to your server. One is to get HTML, another is to get a bundle, then to get actual data. So API will return actual data. After that, the actual page will be rendered. So 3 times you're supposed to send a request to your client. But in case of server side rendering, so let me save this so that we, okay, yeah. So in case of server side rendering, the whole the request to your, the whole communication between client and server will be slightly different. The aim in server side rendering is getting everything related to one page in a single request. So let us see how that works. So this is your say client application running in a browser, client machine, and as I said, the server is hosted in some cloud hosted server, and it has 2 parts, client part and server part. Okay. So this is running in 3000 port, and this is running in 3001 port. Okay. And then so in case of server side running, what happens when a request is sent to your client part of your web app, so what happens here is, for the same one single request, calling an API and returning the bundle.js, everything will happen in one particular response, in one particular request. So what happens here, within server itself, a client to server API call will happen and get the response. Okay, then iterate that response here itself, and then create the entire page by iterating the response and creating objects, and then finally you return one big HTML response which contains everything required for that particular page. So here, if you observe, there is only one request sent to your server. So if you analyze the client request and response communication between client and server, it looks like this. There is a request for HTML, and sorry, this is a request. Okay, yeah. So request is sent to server, and then you will get everything in one response, that is HTML plus bundle.js plus data, everything together in one big HTML response you will get. So here the other 2 requests which we saw here in this request and this request will be eliminated. So this request and this request will be eliminated totally, and only one request will return everything. Okay, everything required for that particular page. So this one big um, response will contain everything. So that's how the number of requests from client to server will be reduced, and this will improve the performance of your page drastically if it is implemented well. And another advantage for going for this uh, server side rendering is your page will be SEO friendly, that is search engine optimization. Because search engines need server side rendering to crawl through your whole page and index your page in their server. And then it is useful for sharing your page on social media, because social media servers like Facebook and Twitter, they need your page should be server rendered, because as soon as you share some page on Facebook or Twitter, they will show the preview of your page. That preview of your page can only possible only if their server can hit to your page and get the entire content in one request, so that they can generate the preview and show it on the screen. And for that you supposed to use some meta tags that will help those social media applications to get the required data for preview. So these two are most important typical what I can say is benefits of SSR, server side rendering. Yeah, it is another name which we usually means for server side rendering, people will call it as SSR also. Another benefit is the performance of the page will be improved, because a lot of processing is happening in server rather than happening in client side. So these are some of the advantages of say SSR. SSR, server side rendering. So maybe in another separate tutorial, separate class, what I will do is I will explain how to implement server side rendering using React.js and using material UI library and Redux.